Getting better is worth it, but the struggle can be rough. Welcome to Art is Easy, the humble series made to find the fun in studying art by making it just a bit easier. This video is about stylized eyes. We'll be breaking down the structure into 3 manageable parts with a full step-by-step run-through at the end that you can try following for yourself. Part 1. Eye shapes. Whether realistic or stylized, to draw an eye, you'll need to start with a basic shape. The shape of the eye determines the placement of the eyelashes and the iris. Once you have the structure, filling in the details becomes much easier. But let's take this idea and push it just a small bit further. If you enjoy character design like I do, you've likely noticed how a character's very eye shape can convey different impressions and different personalities. The first 2 ways that I will cover in this video is by changing the width. Take the positions of the upper and lower eyelids and just kind of experiment with the shape and the distance between them. Notice how wider, rounder eyes give off youthful, energetic, and outgoing, while the thinner, more oval-shaped eyes, aside from having more realistic proportions, feel much more calm, grounded, and mature. The second method that I found is by changing the tilt of the eye. Take the positions of the inner and outer corners of the eye and change the heights to visually tilt the shape inward or outward. Inward tilted eyes are very popular because they make your character just look more hot. They give off sort of a dangerous, capable, and seductive vibe, while outward tilted eyes are serving more of an easygoing, sleepy, or even haunted feel, like a spooky kind of hot. Here's a quick tip. I like to use the inner and outer corners as guides for the proportions of the eyes. Paying attention to the corners helps me keep the eyes aligned, even in perspective. They also help gauge the distance. I usually keep about the width of a single eye in between. Remember, try to think of these qualities along a slider, or as different ingredients that you can add more or less of depending on your needs. And while I think most people would agree, character impressions are subjective, so do pay attention to your own sense of taste whenever you make any kind of art. If you need some more practice, try actually tracing eye shapes from references that you like, stylized, anime, or even realistic. If you want to learn more, look up resources about shape language. You learn about how stable, rounded, or even pointy shapes can change the impression of your design. Pretty useful for designing every part of the eye, even whole characters. Part 2. The eyelashes. Real eyelashes are very small and very complex, which is why most artists simplify them into just strokes or shapes. To give our lashes some 3-dimensionality, I like simplifying them into flat ribbons attached to both the top and the bottom eyelids. Much like real eyelashes, the top ribbon is usually drawn much thicker than the bottom ones. Notice how different parts of the ribbon can be twisted upwards or downwards, creating different designs based on how and where the ribbon is twisted up or down. Now that we have our structure, let's take it a bit further. While eyelashes are made of small, separate hairs, drawing the whole clump of hair as a single shape is usually a tried and tested method. Pointy, triangle shapes are common, but really any shape or form can be used to give your lashes some extra detail for more crazy, unique designs. Try imagining adding in or cutting out different parts and shapes from the flat ribbon, and use the twisting as a guide to give your shapes some 3-dimensional form. For coloring, I prefer to keep the difference between the light and shadow colors mostly subtle. Too much contrast in the lashes, I think, overpowers the iris, which is where I personally prefer the focus to be. For hue, black or brown is common, but of course, feel free to get creative with it. I've seen a lot of anime artists add a soft gradient around the ends of the lashes, maybe to add some transparency, but I don't know. Either way, I think it looks really pretty, so pay attention to other artists' tricks and try them yourself. For practice, try making copy studies from photos of flat twisting shapes, like leaves or probably ribbons. Try keeping track of both sides to build your own intuition. If you're up for it, make a few from imagination as well. Part 3. The iris. While the iris might look complicated now, after we break it down into more manageable parts, you'll have all the information you need to just chill and have fun painting silky irises straight from your imagination. We can split the rendering of the iris into 2 distinct parts, the shiny cornea on top and the matte iris underneath. The inner iris is simple because you can paint light and shadow like you would normally. The form is slightly concave, so the top half casts a solid shadow over itself. Here's a simple tip that you might have heard of for finding shadow colors. Simply take the base color, usually your lid half, and drop the value halfway to black. Try desaturating the color a bit to describe a lack of vibrancy from getting less light. If the environment is giving off a certain ambient color, move the hue a little bit towards it too. But no need to be too precise though. It's best to develop your own intuition for these things. For the cornea, imagine a smooth bead of glass or crystal nested into the concave shape of the iris, like a gem pendant. If a light were shining from the top, a soft glow starts pooling at the bottom. This is due to the light being diffused throughout the material by the time it reaches the bottom lip of the inner iris. I like shifting the hue and raising the saturation a bit around the edge of the glow where it transitions out. Make sure there's enough contrast between the shadowed top half and the glow at the bottom. We'll need some darkness to make sure that the highlights stand out. Speaking of highlights, a common way to paint them in is by adding a small white dot around where most of the light is hitting. I also like to add a bright color around the highlight for effect. While this is effective, to hopefully give you some confidence to experiment with shiny surfaces, here's a bit of what I know about reflections. Alright, try imagining a flat mirror. Inside that mirror is like a framed picture of the environment in front of it. What we see is what the mirror sees, like an image from a regular camera. If the mirror were round, like the cornea, the image inside warps similar to what a fisheye camera sees. The horizon between the ground and the sky becomes curved. Now, if that ball were made of crystal, the environment around it, being the same as before, would be reflected in a similar way. Notice how the sun becomes the shape of the highlight. Usually in gems, powerful light sources become the shape of the highlight. Less powerful ones like the sky or reflective surfaces make an impression, and non-light sources just become dark shapes. I think depicting the primary and secondary light sources in the reflection is what makes a gem look really shiny. To keep things simple, the highlight and what I'm unofficially calling the skylight. I like to call the secondary light the skylight because in most cases, usually anime eyes, a simplified depiction of the sky is used for this effect, even if there isn't any sky in the scene. Try adding the skylight around your highlight for an extra glossy effect. Just take the color underneath and raise the value just a bit. Experiment with the saturation of the color while you shift it closer to white. Also, try shifting the hue towards the color of your sky, usually blue or orange for, different kinds of sky. To recap, the iris is rendered with 4 different effects. The cast shadow of the inner iris, the glow at the bottom, the bright highlight, and the less bright skylight. Alright, part 4. Time to add everything together. A few tips before the demo. I'm drawing with symmetry, so look up if your program has it. Here's a quick guide on how to set it up on Clip Studio Paint, which is the program that I'm using. If you won't be using symmetry, I recommend gathering images to reference or even trace just for the structure. Just, improvise your own details. We're here to learn and have fun. Don't cheat yourself, but don't make things too hard as well. Alright, let's start with the eye shape. I decided on something a bit thinner with an inside tilt. You could go for something similar or experiment with any combination of shape, eyelash, or iris that you want. Just, try to have fun with it. Speaking of fun, here's my first attempt at a sketch for the demo. I didn't really end up liking it, but, feeling disappointment and frustration at your own work can happen often. Just remember that you can always take a break or work over what progress you made and just try again. I kept on just drawing over what I had for a while until I ended up with this. Here, you can see how the details follow the eye shape. Blocking in the placement of the iris is also helpful. I'm mixing in some wilder bits in the design like flame shapes for the eyelashes, just to help show how crazy you can get with it. Now that the sketch is done, it's time for some coloring. Starting with the lashes, I went with a down to up twist to really push the feeling of that inside tilt. To make the split color scheme idea stand out, I blocked in the inner part with more usual subdued colors like a very dark bluish gray. Pushing for some contrast, I went with a saturated purple to start the fire gradient. Then I airbrushed in some bright magenta and then some bright orange. Notice how the magenta lets the purple transition smoothly into the orange color. Whenever you get the chance to paint gradients, try running through the adjacent colors on the color wheel. I found that this makes for more satisfying and smooth color transitions. Detailing the dark part of the lashes, I just raised the value a small bit. just to give it a bit of a shine. Not too much to make sure to keep the focus on the more interesting parts. Alright, starting on the iris, I decided on sort of defining the border by lining the edges. I also varied the line weight for style. Nothing necessary, I guess I just kind of like the look. I'm keeping to my previous tip of shifting through the adjacent colors by going through magenta for the lights, a bit more of a purple for the transition, and then a dark indigo for the shadows. My values aren't really that accurate to real-world lighting. I'm really more concerned about having good contrast and just what looks cool to me. Next is the glow. I'm blending that magenta into a brighter orange and then an even brighter yellow to match the color of the flames. Then I added a simple highlight with a bit of subtle detail. Finally, a slightly brighter blue for the skylight, blending in some more edges to smooth out the transitions. Alright, for the finishing touches, I added a bit of a soft shadow to the whites of the eyes and some extra detail to denote the inner corners and that little eyelid crease that some people have. And that's it. That was my simple, not so simple tutorial on eyes. Here are the finished eyes, and here's what it looks like on a face. Not quite covering perspective for now though. I might cover that topic for a later video. But I hope you found this one helpful anyways. Hope you have a great day, and thanks a lot for watching.